brands will still exist as companies, and that's still valuable to build. We're not taking anything away from that. But there's something people would love to hear the story. So even if you have a brand, people like to know the story of the founders. They like to connect with the people behind it.
How to build a personal brand as a founder. Why it's important. The first steps to take. How to determine your niche. Long form versus short form content. And the power of writing the book. We've got our expert with us today, Hassan Kubba, the author of the best-selling book, The Unfair Advantage. He's also now an author coach and a keynote speaker after previously bootstrapping a successful marketing agency. Hope you enjoy this episode. I'm Amma from the Bay HQ, and this podcast is powered by HSBC Innovation Banking. So Hassan, why should founders even be thinking about personal brand? Because I know some founders are quite shy, for example.
Yeah, I think personal brand is just a thing that's going to keep growing. And I think it's the natural way for people to sort of... Well, what is a brand? A brand is sort of a reputation or an association that people have. You know, hopefully it's a positive association. Hopefully they have a good kind of... It's literally like having a reputation, but for something that's like a group of people that's kind of faceless. A company is like, a company literally means a group of people, right? And the point of a company is that it exists. You can replace the people, the company will still exist. That's the idea of having sort of a separate entity. But I think the personal brand thing is just huge. And we've all seen it. We've all seen how the most, we're moving away. I think there's this thing about the 20th century where it was about big brands because it was all about economies of scale. It was all about factory and assembly line production. And so it was all about the brands. And I think we're moving away from that now to people. And you see that in that, even for example, Tim Cook has more followers on social media than Apple as a company has. And people are more interested in him. And this is Tim Cook, not the founder, not super charismatic guy. I don't really hear people raving about Tim Cook, right? Because he you know what I mean? So, but he still has more followers, let alone people like Elon Musk, more followers than Tesla or SpaceX, let alone, I don't know, think of anybody else. Any big kind of names nowadays, it's more about the people. And brands will still exist as companies, and that's still valuable to build. We're not taking anything away from that. But there's something people would love to hear the story. So even if you have a brand, people like to know the story of the founders. They like to connect with the people behind it. And oftentimes the story of the company is the story of the founders. That's the key. It's how did the company get here? Well, the founders had this idea. They were facing this problem. They had this insight, and they decided to do this. So yeah, I really think that personal brand is just going to keep growing more and more based on the social media kind of world that we live in. That's only going to become stronger. I think more CEOs are going to start to become more and more outspoken and develop and build their personal brands because it's just a very, very valuable way to get attention. It's a very, very valuable way to get attention for free, pretty much. Think of the other example comes to mind is Richard Branson, who was very early into the personal branding game. He's much more well-known than Virgin is, right? And it's key. And he's always used it as a clever way to get media, to get attention, even before the social media and all of that.
I think you've built your own personal brand in many different ways, right? So you've obviously got your book, you've done a podcast in the past, you've got newsletters, you've got your writing, you've got guesting on other people's podcasts like this. There's so many different ways to go about it. I think that overwhelms a lot of people. And let's say somebody listening now is a founder, they're quite early stage in their business. What's maybe the first steps they should start thinking about before they start trying to build their personal brand?
The first steps to think about, I think personal brand is mostly about content marketing, right? We call it content marketing, but it's about content. It's about writing stuff and sharing it. Like a tweet is content. A LinkedIn post is content. A book is content. A video, everything is content, whether it's just an interview you're doing and it's off the cuff, or whether you've pre-planned it and you had copywriters work on it or whatever. Ultimately, it's going to come from content. And content, when you're copywriting, what you have to think about is who's it for? What am I trying to say? What are the values here? One of the lenses I like to use is what is the transformation I'm helping people make? What's the transformation my company helps people make? It helps them get from A to B. My company helps people get from A to B, my startup. Okay, what is A and what is B? And who are they? And why did I do that? And did I face it? Maybe it's like I was scratching my own itch. I was facing the problem and I decided to solve it. Or maybe it comes from another angle and I have to use other people's stories. But there's something linked to why am I the one who started this company? Why me? And I think that is the first thing to think about, is to think about, why is it that you've started this company, this startup, this organization? What's your story? You don't have to go super in depth. It doesn't need to be like a therapy session. But when you're brainstorming, you should go deeper than you would probably publicly share. And then think, okay, how much do I want to share publicly? How much of that do I want to show as the thing? What do I want to be known for? People will naturally put you in like buckets in their head. And this is something that people have known so well in branding, positioning. And you have to think, okay, what bucket am I in? Am I just in this? Can I stand out in some way? Can I define my own sort of bucket in a way, the category that what I'm known for? Am I how can we get to some specific examples? Am I the e-commerce guy who's doing gym, shaping how gym clothes are? Or am I the one who's trying to get humanity to Mars, trying to get us to space? Am I what do you want to be known for? And what category is that? Are you just another, shampoo company? I don't know why shampoo came to my mind, but essentially you want to think of that. Is it just another SaaS business, right? Or is it something more specific to my target audience? Because it doesn't need to be to the, branding isn't necessary to everyone. It's who you're targeting. And so, or am I solving a particular problem they're facing? Am I saving them money? Am I getting them more sales? Am I, whatever it might be? Am I making them look good to their boss? And so you want to know what problem that is that you're solving and why it's you, and how they can kind of get to know you as a personality, how you're faced. I always encourage CEOs to be yeah, why don't you go on that video, that explainer video? Why isn't it you? It doesn't have to be, but it could really help. And that's a well-known thing, a CEO to kind of build that relationship and build that audience. So these are the sorts of things. I've thrown a few ideas out there, but it's all about starting kind of strategically of what do I want to be known for? I like to think of it as reputation. Personal brand is like a reputation. What reputation do I want to build for myself? What do I want to be known for? What are people going to think of me as? Quick example, just to wrap up this whole smorgasbord of ideas and thoughts. I was doing a marketing agency for local businesses. So I was working with dentists and tile businesses, a catering company, etc. My first business is when I first started out. And in their minds, this is 10 years ago. In their minds, they thought of me as the internet guy. They didn't care. They didn't think I was just doing websites, or I was just doing SEO, or I was just doing a new logo for them, because branding just meant logo to them, right? You have to think of what they think of it. And so to them, I was just the internet guy. And in fact, sometimes they abstracted out to just the computer guy. And so one day I got a call from one of the managers of one of my clients to be Hassan, the printer isn't working. What can we do? I'm I've done your website. What have I got to do with the printer? And that's the thing. It's because in the category in their heads, the reputation is I'm the computer guy, right? That's just how they saw it. So that's the key, is to understand not what you think of yourself. What do other people think of you? How they categorize you? Because people probably think of you less than you might imagine. And so they're just going to jump to quick judgments, quick assumptions oh yeah, he's software. He does this software, this CRM software. Okay, cool. And that's it. And it's no, but you're trying to nuance it or something. But it's tough. And that's why you want to get ahead of that and be strategic about it and get known for something. And basically that's what personal brand is for, is to be strategic about the communications there and the reputation you want to build and the category or bucket you want to be put in.
I think what's really interesting there is so many founders look at the people right at the very top as their examples. So a classic one, for example, is Stephen Bartlett, right? Where when you look at Stephen Bartlett's journey, he started off, Diary of a CEO was actually about his business. Whereas now it's way more mainstream, right? And I see a lot of people, what mistake I think they make, and you might agree or disagree, is that they see that model and I've got to be everywhere, and they're trying to get as many views as they possibly can. And it was almost that fame element, as opposed to, you said, about what do you want to be known for? And how should people be thinking about that in terms of how big of a niche should you be targeting? And one thing I'm quite lucky on, for example, my own LinkedIn content, is I'm basically targeting founders of any kind, which is quite useful for me because then I can do different types of advice that are going to impact founders. But that's because of what my business is. Whereas if you're a business which is about sales software, then having every type of founder might not necessarily be the best thing for you. So how do you think about how to determine how big your niche should be?
Yeah, I think the key is to think about, what do you want out of this? What are the objectives? We start with why, as Simon Sinek has popularized, but really we all know that everything starts with a goal. It starts with the objectives. And why build a personal brand? Well, some of the reasons that people build personal brands, or especially founders, is, of course, for sales, clients, customers, users. That's a piece of it. But also there's a lot of other goals, there's a lot of other stakeholders, there's a lot of other challenges. So, for example, a big one is recruiting, is to attract talent. And that's always going to be a struggle. That's always going to be an ongoing thing. And how do you do that? Well, you can, kind of showcase the values and the personality behind the business to give an idea of what it's like to work there. And that we're working on something meaningful and interesting. And we have a great environment, and we have a great camaraderie, or we have a great kind of mentorship thing, or whatever that might be. And that starts from the top. Other thing is to, raise funding. Is to get investors to sort of trust and build confidence in them. That you're making progress, that there's momentum, that there's something happening. The other thing is media and PR. You might want to just get the attention of journalists. You might want to get some press. You might want to get some interviews. You might want to leverage media without having to pay for it directly in terms of ads. The other thing that you might be thinking about is you might be thinking longer term, even to build a personal brand for beyond the company when you've exited one day, hopefully, or something like that. You might want to write a book one day, or you might want to teach other people, or you might want to help others. You might want to just have some impact. So that could be more about the meta journey that you've had as an entrepreneur. You might be talking about entrepreneurship or being a founder or doing a startup. That's a very common thing to talk about. One of the things I talk about most now, which I never expected that I'm going to be talking about a lot, is becoming an author, is writing a book, right? That's the meta journey. It's not, my book is about starting a startup. For the most part, ostensibly, it's about success in general, but for the most part, it's about starting a company or starting something like that. But really what people come to me even more for is, how did you get a publishing deal? How did your book do so well? How did you win awards? How did you get so many amazing reviews? How did it go viral on YouTube? All these kinds of topics has become more what I talk about than startups. And I get more coaching clients in that space than in the startup space, and I also get the intersection where it's like the creator economy startups and stuff like that, which is very interesting. But yeah, so then there's the meta journey. Like maybe that's the brand you want to build. Or maybe it's just a reputation thing. Or maybe you just want to build a certain reputation about yourself, or you just want to, there's no wrong or right answer, but these are the common objectives. And so based on those objectives, the niche is dictated, because it's like, okay, so who's this for? Right? Is this just for people in fintech who are, or whatever, in banking, who want to kind of solve this really niche issue with our piece of software? And that's going to be a very small audience. Or is it going to be something like, is it a B2C company? And then it's going to be a much bigger brand, that you want to build, because it's just much more people. So that kind of dictates the kind of the sheer numbers. You touched on Stephen Bartlett. Yeah, like going mainstream. A good counterexample to this, and just to illustrate your point even further, is I've worked with TikTok creators. So TikTok creators can have like millions of views, millions of followers, and they still might not, this has become a well-known issue. They still might not even be able to fill up a room if they're talking. Like not enough people are interested to even buy tickets or go to, this is insights from VidCon, one of the YouTuber conferences. They'll be like, oh, there's a huge TikToker, and the room is not even getting filled up because no one really knows who they are. Because it's like, so views is not a good proxy. Like podcasts will have much fewer like views or listens, but people have a much deeper connection. Same with like people who've listened to an audiobook or read a book. So yeah, don't judge it purely on like numbers, because it's memorability and like depth of relationship is what matters. Not just how many people know you. And it's just, based on your objective. Like, it might not be a huge audience that you want to get. It might just be the right people. If you have the right people, like having 100 views on a YouTube video, it could be like one of those people could be like, the game changer, the client that changes everything. Who knows? Could be the investor that changes everything, or a journalist or something. So you never know. And you have to bear that in mind.
We hope you're enjoying the episode so far. We just want to give a quick shout out to our headline partners, HSBC Innovation Banking. One of the biggest challenges for so many startups is finding the right bank to support them. Because you might start off and try to use a traditional bank, but they don't understand what you're doing. You're just talking to an AI assistant, or you're talking to somebody who doesn't really understand what it is you've been trying to do. HSBC have got the team that are built out over years to make sure they understand what you're doing. They've got the deep sector expertise, and they can help connect you with the right people to make your dreams come true. So if you want to learn more, check out hsbcinnovationbanking.com. It's really interesting what you said there as well about once you start creating content and putting yourself out there as a personal brand, where you then get people who want to reach out about how you built your personal brand. For example, about the book review. And I get the same thing about podcasting. It's like, I didn't necessarily want to be the guy telling people how to create podcasts, but now we do offer that service because there's just so much demand for it. Then makes sense to do it. But obviously your book was about unfair advantages, right? And how have you leveraged your own unfair advantages in building your own personal brand? And how could other people listening think about what advantages they might have that would enable them to build their personal brand effectively too?
Unfair advantages is the key. So the idea behind unfair advantages is success is not just about hard work. It's about identifying and leveraging unfair advantages. Unfair advantages are kind of strengths that you have internally, like talents, let's say, or things which you're naturally good at, or things which people find difficult, which you find easy, but also your circumstances. And so it's constantly changing. So it's a dynamic thing. And so starting out, I had very, very, very few unfair advantages. If you exclude the really important ones, like the fact that I grew up in the UK, I had a good education here, etc., etc. I was born in Baghdad, by the way, for context, just to be, the biggest unfair advantage is location. So other than those kinds of like foundational things, I didn't have many unfair advantages going into business, or even into writing a book. But, you have to just see what you can get, what you can leverage, what you can use, and maybe you can turn a disadvantage into an advantage. So for me, I think it was the key to my success with the book is having a really solid, all the things I described about who your target audience is, what your goal is, all that stuff that I learned in marketing and copywriting, I applied that to the book. What is the transformation I want the reader to have? In this case, it's the reader. Who's the target audience? And applied all of that, made it work, and especially to focus on what the concept is. What's the idea? This idea of unfair advantages. That everybody has unfair advantages. You just need to figure out what they are. That is what gave us the initial boost, because we put in so much effort into the book quality. We had word of mouth, and the idea was refreshing, and the concept was like good enough to go viral on YouTube. And so from that, I was able to then leverage that to use my personal brand. So that was the thing. So it was almost like I was using that. And also even having a co-author, he was the first marketing director of Just Eat. Not a huge unfair advantage, not as big as that sounds. He wasn't like famous. He didn't have a big following, and neither did I. That's why I say, like, most authors are like famous, and that's how they get book deals. They have like huge followings. They're big like professors and academics, and they've already written books. They're usually repeat authors. So for a first-time author, you have to really, really nail a good concept. So I think it's really important to know the message you're trying to sell. What is a transformation? Who you're trying to help? What's the unique perspective that's compelling? And it was that I was able to leverage into, like, okay, now I've got word of mouth. Now I've got people talking about it, and then use that, and then like use other people's audiences. So for example, Ali Abdal, his video went viral, which was summarizing the book and interviewing me. And then so then his audience got to know about the book and bought the book. So that's like leveraging other people's audiences. So you don't necessarily need to have your own huge following. You can use other people's. So that's the key. The key is to think like that, is to think of how can I leverage this? What can I do? and to have a good starting point, to have the strategy in the right place, the right foundation, which is like something that I'm constantly helping people with, is like, okay, who are you targeting? What's your messaging, etc.
And we touched on this earlier as well. We said about the difference between different types of content, right? Where you might get 1 million views on TikTok, but then how much trust have you actually built with those 1 million people? Whereas, let's say you get 100 people listening to this podcast right now, right? They're going to recognize my voice. If they are watching this on YouTube and they've sat here for half an hour watching us, they're going to recognize us. They're going to look familiar, right? And it's a much bigger impact than, say, a short 10-second video. Whereas a book, like I said, it's even bigger than that, right? Because somebody's giving up, say, I don't know how long it takes to read the average book, depending how fast you are, but it's going to be hours of their time, right? And they're going to then recognize you really strongly. And for somebody who's just thinking about starting out their personal brand, right? I think so many people have this idea they want to do a book one day. How can you think about like when's the right time to do that in your personal brand journey? Like, would you recommend starting off with the book first, or should they do other things first and ladder up to it? Or how does a book fit into somebody's personal brand when they're thinking about it from a founder perspective?
Yeah, good question. So a book is a very, very powerful thing because it gives you like instant credibility in whatever the book is about. It's like this whole kind of phrase of like, do I know this topic? Well, I wrote a book about it. And it's like this idea of like, if you wrote a book about it, you would know. And it's true. I mean, unless you put in no effort and just churn out something horrible, you are going to have to go so in depth. You're going to have to think about it a lot. You're going to have to research it a lot. You're going to have to like touch in on your experiences, etc., to actually know the topic inside and out to write a book on it. So there's that phrase, it's like, what's the book that's going to most change your life? It's the book that you write. It's not the one that you read. And it's been so true in my experience. And I've worked with a lot of like prospective authors who are trying to write their first books and then have gotten signed by literary agents by working with me, gotten publishing deals by working with me, even got a New York Times bestseller by working with me. And really for them, it's like been a huge game changer, even when they've already had a big audience, because it's a different level of credibility. It's a different level of like, even in terms of attracting media attention, in terms of getting invited to speaking events, getting clients, getting inbound, just people just like, oh my God, I read your book and it changed my life, and getting emails from all over the world. That's the cool thing about writing a book. So when to do that? I think if you have something interesting to say, if you have a message to share, and I think more of us have a message to share than we think. And I think if you have an idea worth sharing, it's the way I see it. If you have an idea worth sharing, a new perspective, it doesn't need to be something completely original. There is nothing really completely original. I think it's mostly having a new take on something familiar. And so it's important to really refine and hone the idea and work on that. So I would be thinking of it, whatever stage you're at, I'd be thinking of what is the thing that I want to share? What's the thing I want to impart with the world? And that's the kind of perspective I take, because it takes time to develop. So people often ask us, how long did it take us to write the book? It was like 2 years of no actual writing and just thinking about and refining the concept. Part-time, of course. We had businesses and jobs and, things that we were running, investments. But, here and there, we'd be like, okay, what is this concept we're trying to say? What is this thing? There's this insight we want to share. How do we explain it? Okay, unfair advantages. All right, how do we define that? Okay, there's this thing called the Miles framework, and there's this whole thing about how to order your unfair advantages. It took time to develop, and then to stress test, and then to actually do like basically customer development. We treated it like a startup. We treated it like a product, and we tested it in front of people. We spoke it. We shared the idea on stage. We got feedback from people. We were mentoring startup founders. And we saw, where did they get stuck? Where did they struggle? And that's how we developed the idea. So I think it's something to think about, because people think that you have to have a huge audience to do it. Of course, that's a huge unfair advantage if you do. It's your platform. They call it your author platform. If you have that, that's huge. And that will definitely help you get a book deal. And it'll definitely help you sell books. But it's possible without one. I did it without one. And there have been many others that have done it without one. One of my clients got a book deal without having any audience. It's just about having an interesting thing to share and having such a unique take on it and showing that you're willing to promote it. Having an interesting take, willing to promote it. And, you're going to don't just put a book out and just sit back and hope that they do all the marketing and selling for you. You're in with a chance of getting a book deal. It's not easy. It's like raising funding. It's like it's not easy to raise funding, but it's possible. And so that's the way I share it. So if you're thinking about it, then you should probably go deeper and thinking about it even more, because it's really life-changing.
I like what you said as well about the most impactful book you're ever going to write is the one you write yourself. And I think even the stuff you said too about that 2 years of thinking is that clarity of thought. And that clarity of thought, even if you don't end up writing the book, the fact that you've gone through that process to think about that makes your messaging and positioning more clear. And even just creating content like on a daily basis, like I'm forced to think about what are my ideas. And sometimes you have the kind of rough thing in your head, but then when you know that somebody's going to read this and you've got to articulate it clearly, it really solidifies the way you think, which is beneficial like internally for yourself when you're struggling with different problems, you have to articulate it properly. Also, you said for like hiring for investors, where it's a way to almost train your brain in terms of like, what exactly do I mean when I say things? And we both have this experience. Probably we talk to a lot of people who don't really know what they mean. And you can chat to them for about an hour and say, I don't actually understand what they do, to be honest. And some of it is just they haven't been through that process of trying to make their thoughts clearer. But we are going to have to move to quick fire questions now because of timing. And like, really enjoy this conversation. Obviously, we've known each other. You were episode 2 of the podcast or 3 of the podcast. So it's good to get you back on again as well. But quick fire questions is who's 3 people you'd love to shout out they think are doing incredible work and you think the audience should pay attention to?
So the 3 people that come to mind for me, I'm going to start with most famous to least famous. And so the first one that came to mind is just Ali Abdaal. He's such a good friend of mine now. He started off with being like a coaching client. Well, first he just summarized and reviewed the book and invited me on as an interview. Then became a friend and coaching client. I was coaching him on his business and then on his book. And we launched his online course, etc. together. We strategized on that and then worked on his book together, which was really interesting to start from complete scratch, just to hone and refine the idea. Ali's really, really gracious. He's gracious with people. He's gracious with his time. He's humble. He wants to share. You'd think, having 5 million plus YouTube subscribers would get to his head, or like 500,000 people on his newsletter. It really doesn't. He's just genuinely tries to make time for people. He genuinely tries to help people. And so, yeah, I think like he's not like peaking. He's nowhere near that. I think he's just going to keep going on and on. So I'll start with Ali Abdaal, which some of your audience, I'm sure, will be familiar with already. The second one is a guest that you've had on who gave me a shout out as well. And I'm not just trying to reciprocate it. I genuinely mean he's one of the most interesting, insightful people that I've worked with. He's just a brilliant founder. And this is Hussein Kasai, the founder of Quench.ai. And he was also the founder of, a co-founder of Onfido. He was a CEO of Onfido, which has done extremely well. I think recently sold. They've just exited that now, which is amazing. Hussein is just, again, I think I'm just drawn to people who are very humble. He's just a very humble guy. You've met him, Amar. I recommended him for the podcast. And he the way he thinks, he's so effective as a founder and a CEO, but at the same time, he doesn't fit into that kind of, I don't know, like let's stereotype it as the toxic hustle, type of CEO. He's so not that, but at the same time, he's so effective, which is incredible because like he can be kind, he can be thoughtful, and at the same time, he's super effective. He's super clear. So Hussein is awesome. Hussein Kasai. And the third one is Safar Al-Khatib. I can't remember if I mentioned him to you before, Amma. He's a really good friend of mine, and I consider him almost as a mentor. But like I kind of got to know him more recently. He's not like a mentor from ages ago. I've known him for I met him in 2019. I was speaking at a conference. He was in the audience, and he really liked my talk. And this guy is again super humble, but like super accomplished. He's like a serial founder. He was a brilliant developer when he was younger, like a CTO, but also a CEO. He's done so many companies. The latest one is AutoCab that he's worked on for the last decade or so. That got acquired by Uber. So it actually is become an Uber company. It's like a 250 employees, something like that. I can't remember the number, but like a large number of employees, a good scale up. And again, super generous, super insightful, thoughtful, and definitely recommend you have him on. So yeah, Safar, he's just a brilliant, Asian entrepreneur. These are the three that I wanted to give shout outs to.
Yeah, obviously met the first two before. Like I said, it's interesting sometimes people who've reached that kind of level, you sometimes expect them not to be as friendly as they are. And then it's quite a nice surprise when they are. And like next question obviously is, been great to have you on today, and hopefully people have learned a lot. But if they want to learn more from you, if they want to find out more, where can they follow you? Where can they keep track of what you're up to?
Sure, yeah. So I have hassankubba.substack.com is my new Substack. I'm sharing there about how to build a personal brand, and in particular, how to think about becoming a published and best-selling author, how to think about that path. And as you said, that crystallization of ideas helps you to also come up with a content strategy. I've worked with a lot of founders and people with companies who get so much clearer about who they're targeting just by going through the process with me in terms of like target readers, audience, what is this damn book about? What's the concept? What's the theme? So that is where I would recommend people. There's also a quiz, and maybe I'll share with you the link for what kind of author you might be if that's what you're trying to build as an author. And of course, I'm on social media as well. So yeah, I'd love to share that quiz. You can take it for free. It gives you insights about yourself. There's another quiz I've got called, what's your unfair advantage? If you're interested in that, you can probably, find links for that. But yeah, I'm Hassan Kubba on social medias, and I'd love to connect. I still do all my DMs and everything myself. And I love connecting with people, answering questions, etc. So please feel free to reach out.
And then one more question is there anything that you need help with? Is there anything the audience listening right now might be able to help you with?
Nothing immediately comes to mind. I'm looking to just build that newsletter, and I'm going to be launching another brand called Success Decoded. It's called almost a relaunch. It was like a lockdown project. And what do I need help with? Share my articles if you find them valuable. I'm going to be in content, videos, etc., articles. Just use the share button, share with people who would be interested. So I've done a big, and Amar, you actually even gave me feedback on this. I've done a huge case study on Ali Abdaal's book process. It's very in-depth. I've shared everything that I could squeeze in about like the publishing world, what the misconceptions are, what people need to know if they're thinking about writing a book. And yeah, so it's one of those, it took me a very long time to write. So if anybody gets value from them, please share, put a link to it, and subscribe to the newsletter. So yeah, nothing in particular except to hopefully enjoy my content and share it with people if you find it valuable.
So thanks so much for coming on today. It's been a pleasure. Any final words to the audience?
Yeah, I'd love to connect. I know what it's like to start a company. I know what it's like. I've worked with founders who've gone through so much trouble. I know you can't find the time to create content and build your own personal brand for yourself, but it's just key to have that strategy in place and to have that clarity in the beginning. So I just urge you to really think about it so that you can start to be a bit more mindful and a bit more purposeful about how you put yourself out there. Because it's not about just putting in a ton of time and you've got no time for it. It could be as simple as just tweaking your LinkedIn profile, tweaking your Twitter profile, and then hopefully that's a foundation to start creating content from there.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.